Hello and welcome to another episode of Wheel of Horror, the podcast where two best friends normally spin a wheel once a week and it normally chooses the horror movie. But today we have a very special episode. Today we have our first horror author. We have Mr. Scott Bradley, or S.A. Bradley, and he's going to be here talking about his new book, Screaming for Pleasure. I am your co-host, Alec.
I'm Justin. Thanks for joining us, Scott.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. This is great. And I'm always happy to spread the gospel of horror, even though I'm preaching to the converted here, most likely. It's one of those things I really enjoy doing. I like to think that horror is easily one of the most diverse and beautiful storytelling styles that we've got. And it's also one of the oldest storytelling styles, and it's tailor-made for allegory and metaphor and allows us to talk about those uncomfortable subjects that we'd never sit to watch in a straight drama. And I think there's a horror movie for everybody, and I like to tell people that you used to love horror movies and you secretly still do. You just need to find the right one.
That's so true. There really is a horror movie for literally everybody. It's like you're scared of spiders, you're scared of dolls, you're scared of clowns, you're scared of ghosts, you're scared of what's inside your body. I mean, everything. So you're right. It really can be for everybody. You also host a podcast that's been going on for quite a while now. Is it Hellbent Horror?
Hellbent for Horror. It's a podcast about everything that's related to horror, where I talk about art and social commentary through the horror genre. And that can be through books, it can be through movies, it can be through music. I talk about murder ballads and things like that. And I like to talk about the stories that shaped me, but also how horror shapes the culture shapes horror. It's a lot of fun.
I actually listened to your 100th one today.
Oh, thank you.
You were talking about the DriveThru, and you were talking about a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, it's. I think if I remember correctly, it was talking about I was really talking about passion, the kind of thing that we're talking about here, where we are fans, but we're not just fans. It affects us emotionally in such a way that we're compelled to create in one way or another. And sometimes that creation is we make podcasts. Sometimes it's write books. Other times it's you buy a drive-in and you start bringing movies that you want to show people to an audience. And just the idea that when you're kind of trafficking in outsider art, where it's not the mainstream, where there's millions of dollars exchanging hands every 5 minutes, you tend to find the people who are just thoroughly in love with it for that reason. So a lot of the people who do this kind of thing, it's more of a love project than it is anything else.
Yeah, you also mentioned, which I liked, how you used to work in Silicon Valley, kind of at a 9-to-5 like most people, and then you quit for your passion, which is great, and it's something both Alec and I talk frequently about. Alec does a ton of voiceover stuff, which I know we mentioned before recording. Eventually he'll make it big enough where he can, he'll be famous and all that stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people are just stuck in that like punch in, punch out. And I think it's a great motivational story that you broke away and found something you like.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I talk about that in the book a lot. The idea of the book is that horror makes you happy and healthy. So it's called Screaming for Pleasure, How Horror Makes You Happy and Healthy. And really is a love letter to all things that go bump in the night, and how horror not only reinvents itself for every generation to reflect the anxieties that are happening at the time, but it can also be healing as well as thrilling. And I talk about, how's it healing? Well, it's not going to like cure your lumbago. You can't get off your pain meds watching horror movies. But at the same time, I think it does help some of us, especially, be able to deal with the side of ourselves, that shadow side of ourselves that's so present at times. And a lot of us like to push that thing down. What I found, especially in writing that book and going to conventions and things like that, is that there's a lot of people who have found a way to have a second act that's a lot better than the first act of their lives. A lot of people had been lost in the drudgery of life, or they went through psychological issues. And it's not like this is a psychiatry thing, but I do think that kind of like Carl Jung talks about the shadow self. There's this part of us, that the primal part of us. And if you don't take care of that primal part, it takes care of you. Before you know it, you're getting divorced, you're in trouble with the law, you're embezzling money, whatever. That dark side of us wants to be fed. And so I've always looked at horror films as a way to be able to have a safe handshake with that. And I look at it as well as this is how sometimes we're able to interact with the problems that are just too big for us. I mean, this is a scary world we're in. But when I'm watching a horror movie, I can turn it off at any time. I'm in control. I'm in control of the thing which bothers me. And I think that all monsters are metaphors. So whatever the boogeyman is, it's really could be your boss, it could be taxes, it could be COVID, whatever it is. But we put that in there because it's allegory and it's metaphor. We're able to take a look at things that are super uncomfortable and have them work. And for me, horror kind of saved me a couple times in my life. Once when I was a small kid and I was in somewhat abusive family. And then later on, I got out of the military and I was just one of those guys that I couldn't reconnect. I was having a problem readjusting to civilian life. And then the last one was being in Silicon Valley. It wasn't 9 to 5. I was working 16 hours a day.
Oh, God.
And I was working for startups. And I did that for 10 years. It was like a big dice roll. I was kind of an adrenaline junkie for most of my life. And so I was getting a lot of adrenaline from that. And then one day I just realized that I had not talked about something that I was passionate about for almost 10 years. I talked about everybody else's passions. I used all of my energy to help other people get what they wanted. And I got the gamblers high and they paid me decently. And then one day it was great until it wasn't. And then my wife basically said, get your ass out of the house. You like monster movies. You talk about horror movies all the time. You watch them. You haven't had an outlet. Why don't you go to a convention? And I was like, the idea of conventions suck. And this is back in like 2015 or so. And I was like, they're money grabs, And I said, what I want to do is I want to talk. And she said, find people to talk to. And so I went from San Francisco to Chicago, not knowing anybody, just got a ticket on the plane, got a hotel room, and got a VIP pass to, I believe it was Flashback Weekend in Chicago. And it was for the Halloween reunion. No Jamie Lee Curtis, no John Carpenter, but you had everybody else. And I was like, well, chances are I'm going to find somebody to talk to if it's a Halloween thing. And I got there and it was my worst nightmare first day. Everybody that was there was just this much huge packages, pounds and pounds and pounds and layers of things that they wanted to get autographed. And anybody that I would talk to, they either talk about Freddy, they talk about Jason, they talk about Jigsaw. And that was the end of their interest. They really were fans of a boogeyman than they were fans of horror. And then I started talking to vendors and I started finding people who were filmmakers and stuff, but they were paying their way by going almost like the Grateful Dead had their fans. It was like these guys went across country vending, selling whatever, masks and stuff, so that they could pay to keep their hobby going and then get their art out there. And I ended up finding guys at the end of the night who stayed up all night. Guys dressed in black T-shirts. There's a party going on. There's beer and God knows what happening in this one room. And I go to the lobby and I see that all these guys have moved the chairs in the lobby all into one corner. And they're sitting there talking. And this ended up being what I call the Algonquin Round Table of Horror. These guys from all over the country that were just like me, probably in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And they were all horror junkies, and all they wanted to do was talk about horror, movies, why they love them, what it is about them, quizzing each other, referring movies that others hadn't seen, and just this general joy. And so that was huge for me, and it changed my life. Before I knew it, I went to see Kevin Smith about a week later, and he said, if you don't have a podcast, you're an idiot. And I was like, okay, fine, point made, let me get in here. And I said, this is what I'm going to do. And before I knew it, I said goodbye to the job, which is crazy. Thank God my wife was just so supportive. And I said, I'm going to try and see if I can start conversations and see where this goes. I need to get this stuff out of me. And that's the thing that I found with the fans that are really kind of the dyed-in-the-wool people, is that it's not about hoarding information. It's about giving information. You want to find your group. You want to find people to connect to. And that's kind of the weird magic that I talk about in the book, that horror allows you to kind of accept that dark side of yourself by having a safe way to get to it. It also allows you to have a sense of play. So many adults, we lose our sense of play because we're in that 9 to 5 grind. Nobody's there to nurture that. Then there's the idea that we also can find our clan, a group of people that are just like us. And if you have those kind of things, a sense of play, a healthy understanding of yourself, an agreement that you're okay, and you can find a sense of play and with friends, that's a pretty healthy life. And so for me, there are many different ways that you can find your group and you can find all of this stuff. And it's just like I did heavy metal and punk band concerts that way too. Whatever it is, grab onto it. And I just wanted to let people know that the redheaded stepchild, the thing that people think is poison, people think is bad, this too can be something that people can grab onto. And for the most part, people that I meet that are into this, they're having a great time. They're not dour, they're not sour. They might have been when they were younger, but somehow we've all come to accept where we are. We get an idea that we can be a little bit silly, and it's okay. And I love meeting people who are on this road of just a happier second act in their lives.
Awesome.
That's exactly it. I mean, it's like when you're a kid, usually you either are going to be completely drawn to this and hopefully find your crowd. But if you don't, then as you get older, there are conventions. There are those people throughout the country that have also felt like you. So yeah, horror is that, like, you're not going to be probably the jock or probably the prom king and loving horror films. Maybe, you might.
Maybe.
But luckily there are conventions and this hardcore fan base that exists now. And something that you were talking about, which I also listened to your episode where you interviewed the creators of Searching for Darkness, which I love those documentaries. So it was great to hear those guys. Your first kiss, that's something that you usually talk about. And I really found that interesting because it seems like most people do remember that, and I can't really say the same for maybe like a drama or a rom-com or certain things, but for horror, I can remember the first thing that really scared the hell out of me.
It's a strong cup of coffee, right? It's a strong cup of coffee. You remember it. And I think that that's what's great about horror. And I talk about that in the book where, it's not the first horror movie you saw. Like I had my dad give me a bunch of horror movies to watch because he knew I liked horror movies, but he also knew I was scared to death of everything.
Right.
So I was very much a crybaby and a scaredy cat when I was a kid, and everything scared me. Even music would scare me. So he had me watch like Them with the giant ants and all of that. And I love them, but they were what I call court-appointed horror. My dad was in charge of what was getting through the door. I didn't have that thing. And I think we learn and we become curious, become courageous when we have something that can corrupt us. So it needed to be something that was mine, that was secret, that was, I shouldn't have been watching it. And that's what I usually hear people talk about when they talk about their first kiss. It's like a first kiss. You kind of steal that first kiss when you're not supposed to. And sometimes it doesn't go well, right? And so I look at the first kiss as being the one that really galvanizes you, that nails you to the back of the wall, the thing that you can't really tell your parents about. And that becomes like this sacred thing. There's usually a corrupter too. It can be the TV, or it can be an uncle. It can be your best friend. It can be your sister. Whatever it is, there's usually something that is your gatekeeper, your guy over the river Styx that takes you across.
Well, typically we have another host, Eric. He's our other horror expert. Him and I grew up in Connecticut, along with Justin. All of us grew up together, but him and I were like,
oh, really? Where in Connecticut?
So we're all from Avon. It's a little town right outside of Hartford.
Okay, so here's a surprise. When I said I got out of the military, I was in stores in Mansfield.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yukon.
Okay.
Yeah, at Yukon. So I worked at a video store there called Video Visions. And that was like one of the most amazing video stores ever. And I went in there when I was not talking to anybody. I was kind of off the radar. And a series of really unfortunate events got me to Connecticut. And I ended up going into Video Visions, and I walk into their area, and I'm like, I just want to take. I was really going for booze, which was next door, right. And next to the package store there was this place. So I walk in, and there's this great directors section. So I'm immediately queued up, and I see the normal, Truffaut and stuff like that. And then next to Altman, there was Cassavetes, okay, and Coppola, okay. And then Carpenter. and Cronenberg. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what? They put Carpenter, Cronenberg, Craven up here?
Yeah.
And I'm looking and I'm going, they are legitimizing this. This is what I'm talking about all the time. So they consider these guys great directors. They didn't put them in the little, like at Thanksgiving, you have the kids table.
Right.
They didn't put them at the kids table. They had them right up there as directors. They made no bones about genre. So I just was like, I need to talk to whoever runs this place. And I went up and I talked to them. I started talking, couldn't stop talking. And by the end of the conversation, he said, we could use somebody here who knows these horror movies as well as you do. Would you like a job? And so I got a job there. And I was like, for 4 years or so, I was the video guy. I was the guy that people would say, what do you, because I was into all kinds of films, but I was really, my heart goes to the horror film. But I also went to film school and stuff. So I knew stuff. And I stayed there, and that's one of the ways that horror kind of saved me. It let me get into conversations again and find a spark of life. So yeah, Connecticut is one of those places you'd never expect. But yeah, I was there for until 1993, and then I came out here.
Wow.
I know you love horror, but is there a specific like subgenre that you like the most? Like, are you a big zombie fan? Do you like your monsters and vampires? Or are you a slasher guy?
Yeah. Oh boy, that's such a hard one for me. I mean, I want to grab all of them, and it's like whenever I'm on one of these things and they want to ask me, "Can you tell me what your favorite horror movie is?" I just kind of die a little inside because I have a hard enough time just whittling it down to five because there's so many different styles. If I had something that I would say, I'm not sure if it's my favorite, but it's the thing that affects me the most. The thing that freaks me out the most are like demonic possession movies.
Yeah.
And
me too.
that just scares me, whereas other movies don't really scare me. But I love being given a sense of unease that I can get in like some found footage movies, zombie movies, which used to be, I mean, it's so funny now. Zombie movies are so mainstream and so common. But when I was growing up in the 80s, there was nothing like that. Was really hardcore stuff. That was like, there's something wrong with you, man. You watch zombie movies, they're eating each other. It's like cannibal movies. And it was like Italian cannibal movies turned into zombie movies. And it was like Romero was considered a genius, but kind of creepy. And so it's so funny now that that's become it's taken away the vampire as the be all metaphor. You can turn a zombie into anything. And I love it, but it used to be the thing like you had to have a strong stomach. You had to be somebody who was like really into splatter if you're going to watch those zombie movies. But for me, the demonic ones, it's because I was born or not born. My parents got into when I was about 6 or 7 a cult. An evangelical cult back in the 70s that said the world was going to end in 1975. And they were very adamant that doomsday was coming. It's all about numerology, and demons were everywhere. Like if you were wearing a cross, you were actually allowing demons to come to you because they believed that was a false idol. Anything that was religious was a false idol. It was really, really crazy. So I grew up, as a young kid, hearing people at church saying, yeah, there was a demon on the bus the other day. It looked like a guy, but his eyes were all black and nobody else noticed. And so I had to get off. I had said prayers and I got off the bus, and you would hear music. Somebody got possessed because of music, all these weird stories. So I left that, obviously. The world did not end in 1975. I felt gypped. They stayed in, but I was like, I can't believe any of this stuff now. And I had read The Exorcist while still in my parents' house, and I was sure I was going to get possessed. When I didn't get possessed and I woke up in the morning and everything was okay, except that I was nervous, I realized that there was a whole different world out there, that I had been like in Shalamayan's The Village. And so I branched out. But there's a part of me deep down that cannot be erased, that was programmed in by having everything that I believed, mom, dad, God, people who I thought were telling the truth, that demons still scare me down there. And it is this whole thing that I'm going to come to this realization that they were right. Like nothing terrifies me more. I have like a recurring nightmare every so often where I'll be at an apartment somewhere and everything's going good. And all of a sudden the lights kind of dim a little bit. And I'm like, what the heck was that? I walk across the room and all of a sudden something invisible tackles me. And while I'm on the ground, I feel this thing laughing, and I go, they were right. That's the scary part.
Mm.
All this time I fooled myself that that was all fairy tale and that
Yeah.
they were wrong. And in the end, feeling this deep fear that they were right. And so every time I watch one of the most disturbing movies to me was Frailty, Bill Paxton's movie. If you haven't
Mm.
seen that and you want to get an idea what I felt like as a kid, that's an amazing film because his dad wakes up one day and says he had a vision from an angel that glowed off of his bowling trophy, and it told him that there are demons and we have to kill the demons. And I was given special powers, and it's like a glove, an axe, and a lead pipe, and they're all blessed instruments. So is dad crazy, or is he actually seeing demons? And when I got out of that movie, I was having like dizzy spells. It just reminded me way too much of being a kid. And it reminded me of when I rebelled against that, how I was punished for the good of my soul. And that there's this really horrible thing of having your parents punishing you horribly, and it's breaking their heart to do it.
Yeah.
And yet they're doing it, and they're doing it because somebody told them that, and that's how it was prescribed in the Bible. So it was really strange, and those movies just have a thing to me. It's a lingering bit of my vegetable brain, my lizard brain down there that says maybe they're for real. So like Paranormal Activity scared the living hell out of me
Oh yeah.
because it was just it was so wonderful. That's such a great film. And that and Blair Witch, those are two movies that are pure cinema. But I
Mm.
think even more Paranormal Activity because it is literally a camera just sitting there, and the audience is so drawn in by the suggestion in the image that our eyes are dancing all the way around that screen, and we are
Right.
making the monster. It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
You're filling it all in.
I have
Yeah.
to agree with you, Scott. One, I guess, category of horror is paranormal that just like I say it on the podcast and Alec knows, but like I'm just like a little child about it. Like I love zombies, vampires, werewolves. Slashers don't really scare me because it's just,
Right.
it's a guy with a knife and you can like throw a chair at him and stop him. But like something about like a little kid in a dark hallway, I'm like, I can't do it.
Yeah, and I'm actually kind of writing about that now. I'm starting a second book, and one of the things that I'm talking about is how we love to say we don't like tropes, but we love tropes. We just hate
Mm.
lazy tropes. And so I'm trying to build a monster like the perfect horror movie templates. Things that I notice that make horror movies that are usually pretty good really stand out by just using their imagination and trying to come up with examples of that. And what I want to talk about that was that for me, the ghost story and the paranormal, the demon movies are the scariest things in the world for the first two acts. And then the third act, they're just procedurals.
Mm.
And I was like, what great horror movies do is they stop being procedurals. Like everything that is a demon movie, it can never get out of the shadow of The Exorcist. It's just too big.
Right.
So the thing that's scary about ghost stories and demon possession stories is the hunt, being hunted, having a predator no one believes except you is after you is the true scary thing. Once people go, oh shit, he's got a demon, then it's just a doctor's visit, right? The story gets to the size of a bed or it gets to the size of a chair. And it's the person tied to that, and then a couple guys saying a couple religious words, and then it's just like forced penicillin, and then it's over. I call it small claims court. I call it ghost stories, the small claims court of horror, because it's like basically a ghost story is there are two parties that can't reconcile, so a third party is brought in and forced to bring the two into court together. It's like a third party must do the mediation for them, and it's always some kind of thing like, oh, we just need to find the hidden key or the old bones that were buried in this place, and it all comes down to a vengeance against a wrong. But my thing is what I like, and why I love the new Candyman is that it ends though right when it's starting to go there, which is if I was an entity that was wronged, do you really think it was just one person that ever wronged me? And why would I go back to sleep? I am now able to maneuver my way through a world that hated me, and I am powerful. Why would I just go, well, thanks for taking care of that problem for me. I guess I'll go back and take the dirt nap. Boy, I'm so glad that you resolved my inner fear. No, why wouldn't it just go out of vengeance and just keep going and eat a city one person at a time? And we find out how guilty we are over a whole bunch of stuff that's happened just by being innocent bystanders, by not doing anything, whatever it might be. I always think of that for like these mysteries and stuff, these thrillers like I Know What You Did Last Summer. There's never one guilty person. There's a bunch of people. That's the red herrings, right? You look and especially mysteries. Mysteries always tell you how shitty people are, right? I think horror movies are much more honest and love the victims more than mysteries do. Mysteries sit there and they kill somebody, and then everybody that's in the room, you find out they're all assholes.
Yeah.
It just says that humanity sucks. And so, why can't a ghost story go down that path and say, well, guess what? You do have a hand in this. And how are you going to get me back in the box? I love the Babadook because it's a horror movie that did a whole new idea for an end. Usually with something like this, you have to kill the monster or the monster kills you. But this was, we find a way to live with the monster. We need to compromise. The monster can't go back in the box. The monster's an emotion.
Yeah.
And so I love that. And so I as much as I love possession films and ghost stories because they're the scariest things, because the stalking, the being the prey is the scariest thing, and being powerless is the scariest thing, that they always go down the trope of, well, now we know how to get it back in the box. I think the most terrifying thing is that it's not back in the box. I think that's something that the modern horror that started really around 1968 with Night of the Living Dead and Targets and Rosemary's Baby, was that we don't go back in the box. The apple cart gets upset and it doesn't get resolved. And we've kind of slowly backstepped away from that and gone back to, well, let's let the audience off, and then we'll just have a booga, booga, booga scary extra addition. No, let people stew in that stuff. That's the stuff that impacts you. We talk about first kiss. Why do you remember your first kiss? Because it didn't resolve. It didn't make you happy. It gave you a slap. It woke you up. It was smelling salts. It was strong coffee.
I just wanted to ask you really quick, because it seems like you really like demon possession movies and then also the found footage kind of genres. They did mix those together, and I wanted to see if you'd ever seen the Last Exorcism. You ever seen that one?
Oh yeah, love The Last Exorcism. It had a few really good scares. It ends with the world coming to an end, right? And you just see this guy running towards a bonfire, and something's coming out of the bonfire.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think that was a really fun one. And another one, if you haven't seen it, probably my favorite of the new found footage films, because I hate that found footage, which is so original. It like Blair Witch was like, it was like Jesus died for our sins. It's like the Blair Witch Project died for our sins. It was like it saved us from the boring old movie that had lightning and stuff and everybody stood in the right place. This was shaky and crazy. And I think that found footage movies, unfortunately, many people just got in there and did the same thing and turned it into a tired trope itself. But the taking of Deborah Logan is masterful.
I have seen that one. Great poster too.
Oh yeah, everything about that. And The Last Exorcism. I follow Ashley Bell on Instagram because she was so good in that movie, and she does that bend that she can do in that movie. She does that bend.
Oh really?
Yeah. So every so often she just does that in a picture. I'm like, woohoo!
Good for her.
You mentioned The First Kiss, which is like the movies that kind of influence you. And I was thinking about it today when you mentioned it in your podcast, and I couldn't pinpoint exactly which horror film I saw back in the day. But if I had to say a few that really stood out to me that kind of like, I don't want to say traumatized, but I vividly remember, it's Devil's Rejects, House of a Thousand Corpses, which I saw way too young. I was just like, my dad had like satellite TV, and I was like, oh, this looks cool. And it wasn't cool back then. And, I was like 11. And one of the movies we reviewed not too long ago was The Others with Nicole Kidman.
Oh yeah.
And like, watching it now, like it wasn't terrifying, but when I saw it, which was probably middle school time, I remember like the lights were off in the living room. My mom was watching it, and I was just horrified on my couch. Like, I didn't know who was a ghost. Nicole Kidman's freaking out in this house. Everything's creaking. Again, little girls just like in dresses with the accent. It was terrifying.
Oh yeah, I mean that's great because those are three. Even though two of those movies are directed by Rob Zombie, I don't think it can get much different than House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Reject in its tone, and then you have something like the others, which is completely different from those. And I think they're great. They're very interesting choices. The others is really unique in one way that it's so old fashioned. There are like several films that are like it, that if you like that kind of style, I can refer like three or four movies. And that's what I love about horror is that, what's horrible or what scares you is totally subjective. So what scares you may not scare me. What scares me might put somebody into a coma, but it is valid for that person. So I try not to say, "Oh, that's terrible," but I will say sometimes if a movie I just don't respond correctly to, or I don't respond the way people want me to. Like we had a couple movies that might have been in the wheel that's on your show, and I look at them and they were all probably loved by somebody, but some of the movies work much better than they do for me. They work better for someone else, and sometimes that's the greatness of having the conversation in the first place, is being able to discuss sensibly with people about what it is that freaks you out and what it is that doesn't freak you out. And that also makes it so that there are people that I know that would never in a million years watch House of a Thousand Corpses. Never.
Yeah.
But I could get them to watch the others. And
Yeah.
or The Shining, something like that. So there's something for everyone, and I think everybody needs that little release, the fun of that release. So it's an interesting thing that you have that broad thing. I really, I have a love-hate relationship with Devil's Rejects. I really loved it when I first saw it. Then I revisited it, I think last year, and some of that ugliness is really ugly.
Yeah.
And so I love the brashness of it, but I do realize why one of my friends was so angry at me that I liked it, because he's like, I cannot cheerlead for these maniacs. I cannot do that. And I was like, oh no, but it's like the Wild Bunch. You have this group of these anti-heroes, and then the good guys turn bad, worse than the bad guys and so I had all these things, and then I watched it again, and I said, no, I can see what would bother you. But I like it a lot more than I do House of a Thousand Corpses. House of a Thousand Corpses has moments that are amazing to me, but the maturity jump from House of a Thousand Corpses to Devil's Rejects is incredible. And I mean that in set design and understanding of tension and character development, even all of that was so profoundly better, as in my opinion, in Devil's Rejects than it was in House of a Thousand Corpses, where I kind of felt like he didn't know who he wanted to be in that movie. There were so many different clashing styles. And just when I was kind of getting into one style, another one appeared. And I started to get to a point where I was like, I can't believe a thing that's happening in this movie. People are dressed in bunny costumes getting stabbed in the field. What the fuck?
Yeah.
So
It's all over the place.
yeah, it's all over the place. And yet there are visual images in that are so strong and so interesting. And I think what really helped his later films is that he really understands production design. He just had to pick one. And he hadn't done that yet in his first film. He was just like, this is going to be like my concerts. I'm just going to have, different themes for different songs. And so I respect that it has the following that it has, because it talked to people in a way that it didn't talk to me. And I think that's always cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just gets back to your point about horror, just about how there is something for everybody, Yeah, I guess my first kiss was a little bit more cliche. It was definitely The Exorcist. I was 8. My mom showed it to me for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And then from that point onward, same as you, Scott, I was afraid of everything. So I remember I'd only watch like Disney Channel because I didn't want to even see the commercials for like Halloween H2O as a kid. I was like, I can't even maybe if I'm watching MTV, maybe a commercial will come on. And then my grandmother got me Halloween on VHS, the original one. And I was like, is this like that new scary one? She's just like, oh no, this is old. This isn't scary. And I was like, oh, okay. And I watched it and I'm like, this is so scary. And it was so way
Right.
scarier than H2O, but as a
Oh
kid,
yeah.
But yeah, those were my first two that like screwed me up, and forever. Still, I hold everything. I'm like, is it as scary as The Exorcist? Like, how is it in
Well, yeah.
comparison?
There's a reason that is one of that, Alien, The Thing,
Yeah.
Halloween
Oh yeah.
are the movies that I hear the most, and The Shining to a certain degree. But those are the movies that I
Oh
hear
yeah.
the most as first kisses, and I think it makes sense. I don't call it cliche because it's a cultural shift.
Yeah.
All those movies shift the culture in their own way. And The Exorcist was huge. I'm a very old man. I was actually alive when The Exorcist was in the theaters, and
Right.
I wasn't old enough, obviously, to see it, but I was old enough to be cognizant of what was going on, how people were fucking freaking out.
Yeah.
And so I remember being so scared because they would do radio ads for The Exorcist, and it would just be Reagan going, yeah, yeah.
Oh my
And I'd
god.
be in the back of my car, my dad's car, like going, oh,
That's messed up.
yeah. They would just have this thing, the William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist, and then they'd have the music. If I heard the music, if I heard a song that had the same kind of chords
Yeah.
that had that music in it,
Me
it
too.
scared me.
I thought The Exorcist and Halloween were the same as a kid because I was just like, oh
Oh,
my god, and same with the fog and like anything that
yeah.
sounded like those bells. I was like, okay, my life. My mom really messed me up. I don't know why she did that.
Yeah, and then you can throw Psycho in there. I mean,
Right.
Psycho is an interesting film because it's so primal. You know, even though it's old and it's got its rickety parts, and the end I think falls apart. Man, that shower sequence still has power, and so does the guy named Arbogast who gets killed going up the stairs.
Yeah, that's
That
cool.
one
Yeah.
just so matter of fact.
Right.
And it was nothing was like that at the time. So even though I don't consider that the first modern horror film because it kind of jumps back into everything's back. Okay, we got him in jail. It was a mommy issue. You know, that's kind of going back to old movies.
Right.
I still think that was the first shot over the bow because that was so modern, so unusual,
Mm.
so disturbing to first off kill off somebody who's the star not even halfway through the film,
Yeah.
and then have extreme violence, even though the knife doesn't truly hit the body at any time. It's just so real
Right.
compared to what was going on in movies that it has to be given some thing. But yeah, I mean, The Exorcist, there's a reason these movies are the ones that everybody talks about. First off, like Halloween was like this jump in quality of scares. There are a
Mm.
lot of scary movies. There's even like Texas Chainsaw, which is very, very excellent, but it still fell into this thing of it was easy to denigrate because it looked greasy and grimy and all of that stuff.
Sure.
Whereas Halloween was streamlined. Halloween felt like he was trying to be Hitchcock, and Hitchcock was kind of the respected guy. So you all of a sudden had this movie that was made for breadcrumbs that looked like it was made for a loaf of bread,
Mm.
and people took notice. It didn't get great reviews when it first came out, but then the Village Voice said something that was very positive. Everybody went and reassessed it because they said there's some good points that are being made about the level of suspense that they're able to crank up here, that it's tasteful. And that was one of the things. It's pretty bloodless. There's a lot of red herrings that are in it, but that camera never stops moving. And that music was so strong. And the killer was thoroughly unique. Carpenter went out of his way to take away. It was like if you've ever heard of the Kuleshov effect, which is an old editing thing where you just have a guy with a blank face and then you put images next to it and you edit them together and the audience fills in the story
Mm.
because nature abhors a vacuum. And so I believe that's what the shape was: white face and garage coveralls. There's no buttons, nothing. He is
Yeah.
just a blank slate standing there, and we project our fear onto it. And I think it was brilliant. And
Mm.
it was such a change. It was super cheap. It started, the craze. I don't consider it the first slasher. I don't consider it a slasher. The sequels I do, but the first one I don't, because it was in its own world. It made rules that didn't even exist yet. I think the first modern slasher is Friday the 13th, because that was the one that said, let's kill teenagers.
Right.
Halloween said, let's scare everybody, and we're going to make teenagers vulnerable. But Friday the 13th was, let's make a mystery, 10 little Indians, but we kill everybody very graphically. And so that was like punk rock. That was the start of it all. That was the explosion. So yeah, I think those movies are remembered because they are seminal and they do change things. They alter stuff. Blair Witch is another one. I think these movies alter the course of horror and alter the course of popular culture, because I think that most popular culture steals an awful lot from horror films.
Well, Scott, you have given us so much to think about. I feel like we could have 10 podcasts just on like little things that you've talked about. Just wanted to thank you so much. This is the first time we've ever had an author on. Your book is Screaming for Pleasure. And do you want to tell us a little bit about where we can find that, about your podcast, and how people can get in touch with you?
Sure thing. So my book, Screaming for Pleasure, How Horror Makes You Happy and Healthy, you can get that on any online thing that you usually go to, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. But I also, if you go to my website, hellbentforhorror.com, I post the ISBN number. And what that is there for is so that if you have a mom and pop store that you really want to support, independent booksellers really need help during these tough times. And so what I say is you can get it through Amazon. You can send Jeff Bezos to space if you want. But if you don't really care about that, you can see about helping out the small business owners by getting the book there. And you can get in touch with me through hellbentforhorror.com. It's Scott@hellbentforhorror.com is my email address. It is on the website as well, and I'm free to send people copies that are signed if they so wish. And you can find my podcast, Hellbent for Horror. It's on all areas that you would normally find a podcast on, including Spotify and other places of renown. And I have shows coming up very soon. And I'm in process of working on another book, and that is intended to be for Halloween of this year.
Ooh, very cool. Yeah, I'm planning on picking up a copy of Screaming for Pleasure. Actually, I've got a flight to Florida next week, so I'm gonna order that. And it's really good to know that we can do that without helping Jeff Bezos more. So that's really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. For the people that are curious, Scott, how would they get a signed copy? By emailing you?
Yes, if you email Scott@hellbentforhorror.com and say that you want to get a copy, it will be $25 for shipping and handling. But other than that, it's pretty much a done deal.
That's awesome. Well, it's been great to have a true horror expert like yourself on here. Yeah. It's definitely a good talk.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Yeah. So for everyone listening, definitely go check out his stuff. Got great reviews on Amazon, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening in. If you haven't had a chance yet, we had our Fresh Film Friday episode come out on The Prestige, and we will have Book of Boba Fett coming out this Wednesday, and we'll see you all next week with Curse of Chucky.
Yep, the protege, but yes.
Why do I keep saying The Prestige? Oh, whatever. All right.
I don't know.
Bye-bye.